Today I'm going to be showing you how to get a finish like this on MDF. Welcome back to Gosforth Handyman and the Gosforth Handyman Tips Library. I hope you're having a fantastic Saturday morning if you're watching this on a Saturday when it's just come out, and if you're watching it at another time, I hope you're having a wonderful day. First of all, if you're new to the channel, a massive welcome to you. It's awesome to have you here. My name's Andy. I run a little joinery business up in Newcastle in the UK. I've been making things out of wood for most of my life. I don't profess to be an expert woodworker by any stretch of the imagination. Most of what I make is kind of utilitarian stuff out of MDF and softwoods and stuff like that. Sometimes I get to work with hardwoods, but it's fairly few and far between, to be honest. Most stuff that people want these days is ultimately going to be, I would say 99% of what I make is built and designed to ultimately be painted white. I know people will disagree in the comments about this, but as far as I'm concerned, there's no better material to work with if you're going to be painting it than MDF. It's highly stable, doesn't suffer from the same sort of contraction and expansion problems that you get with real wood. It paints really, really well. It's easy to work with. You don't have grain showing through the paint. And other than the fact that when you cut it, you get kind of noxious dust that probably will kill you if you inhale it. Other than that, it's just a pleasure to work with. I repeatedly see people either panicking about painting it or making a right hash of it. So I thought it would be nice to just give you a few tips on how to deal with MDF and how to paint it and how to get a really nice finish. Edge grain on MDF. Don't get us wrong, you can get a better finish if you want to really push the boat. For example, I'm not going to get into spray painting. I don't have the room to spray paint, but you could push it to that level if you want and go for a sprayed finish. You can do things obviously like edge banding. I think edge banding on MDF is far too much hassle for the benefit that you get, and too many times I've seen the edge banding coming off over time. Edge banding, by the way, is this stuff, if you can kind of see, and that gets ironed on to the edge of the MDF, and as you iron on, the glue melts and it sticks on, and then you trim off any excess. And you can get machines that do it. You can actually get industrial machines for edge banding. If it starts to come off, it just looks terrible. It's just not worth the hassle. That's a perfectly good finish I've got on the edge of there without any sort of filler or edge banding or anything. If you want to know more about alternative treatments, because you can also use a filler on the edge as well, and that works really well. Again, it's not worth the hassle, but you can do that if you want a really, really ultra smooth edge. I'm not going to bother putting a video together because Charlie D.I. White, I'll put a link in the description, he's done an excellent video comparing all the different treatments of MDF edge grain. He generally agrees with me that the easiest solution is what I'm going to suggest in this video. Without further ado, let's get on with it and show you how to paint MDF properly. You're going to need a good acrylic primer. I use Leyland. I'm not being sponsored by them or anything. I just find this works really well. I also use Leyland fast drying gloss. It's not as shiny as some other gloss paints. It's easy to work with and it gives a level of finish that I'm happy with and my customers are happy with, more importantly. Use whatever brand of paint you want. I use paint that I'm comfortable with, and once I've hit on a brand that I'm happy with, I generally stick to it unless I'm having problems. Anyway, let's crack on. I've got a synthetic brush, a Delta T class brush, which you've probably seen us use before. Dead cheap, nothing special. Nice fine bristles. We've got a foam roller. Again, these are dead cheap as chips, but because you're using water-based paints, they're easy to clean as well. So this is a one that I've used loads of times. It's still got plenty life in it, absolutely fine. If you want to throw them in the bin, fine. I'm far too tight for that. And in case you're not aware, they just slip off and you can put new ones on. I have a damp cloth and I have my acrylic primer undercoat. The thing that I'm going to show you is a panel door kind of mock-up that I've made, and this gives almost every scenario of all the different problems that you're likely to run into when you're painting MDF, because we've got face grain, we've got edge grain, and we've got the panel moulding cutout, which is kind of a combination of face grain and edge grain. This can be kind of the most problematic thing that you might run into. But again, when you know how, it's dead easy, so don't panic. So the first thing that I'm going to do, obviously this is already sanded and all ready for paint. Just giving it a quick blow down with the air gun. Obviously if you don't have an air gun you can just blow it, but this does a bit of a better job. And then I'm just going to give it a light wipe down with a damp cloth. This raises the grain a little bit, but it just makes sure that it's nice and clean and ready for paint. Let's slap some paint on this. I'm going to start with the edges and I'll do the roller after. This is a brand new pot of paint. If it's an older pot, just watch with the water-based paints, because any paint that kind of builds up around the rim here, because it dries so quickly, those bits, once they do dry, can just crack off and fall into the paint. You end up with lumps in your paint. So if you are finding that you're getting lumps in your paint, you can sieve your paint either through a paint sieve or a household sieve, or even you can use like probably a pair of tights or a pair of socks or something like that. I'm sure you can sieve it through anything just to get the lumps out. This is a brand new pot, so we should be fine. I'm actually going to do the edges first on this. I think it'll just make life a little bit easier. And all I'm going to do here, I'm just going on the back side of it, and you see how we get these little kind of tram lines of paint around the edge. I'm just going to smooth those out. I'm not going to show you painting the back of this, but you would go over that obviously when you come to paint the back. So I'm going to just do this middle kind of panel section here first, now that I've done the edges. Again, these are the most awkward bits because it kind of absorbs the paint like a sponge, so you might need a little bit more paint. Not too much though. You want enough to cover it and no more. You certainly, at this stage, we're not aiming for the wood to be turning white. We're aiming for everything to have a really nice even coat of the undercoat. What colour it is, at this point, I don't care. Quite a thin coat if anything. Just going over these edges again to get any kind of thick bits of paint off the edge. And obviously for a small door like this, whether or not you would bother with a roller, maybe you would just brush the whole thing, but I'm going to show you how to get a spray paint finish with a roller. You see this little kind of blob of paint here? You don't want to leave anything like that. That will show through on the final surface. So I'm just now going around all these edges, just checking I haven't left any runs or blobs. I literally just want a nice thin coat of the undercoat. Again, little blobs of paint, let's just brush them out. And then we'll roller these sections. You know, you can get a paint tray out and all that, or you can just use your brush to load some paint on to the piece. That'll work. This is a completely dry roller, so it's going to suck up this paint really quick at the minute. So we might need to put a bit more on. Once your roller's got some paint on it, it's much easier. At the moment, this roller's dry. Okay, so that's actually gone on fine. So all I've done here is I've got an even coat of the paint on, and now I'm just going over it really lightly with the roller just to leave a nice finish, really. That's it. We're not aiming for perfect coverage at the minute. If your piece is bright white at this stage, then I would be worried because you've probably put too much paint on. At this stage it shouldn't be white, it should be a kind of off browny grey colour, because it takes a good 3 coats of paint to cover MDF and make it turn white. In fact, for any paint, 1 coat primer, 2 coats final coat is your general rule of thumb. And that's it. We're just going to leave it. Just double check whether or not I've managed to muck up the panels, which I think I've caught the roller there a little bit, but generally that's fine. I would rather not have a brush mark down there if possible. Let's make this like ultra amazing. Get it covered and then lay it off gently with a roller just to get your perfect finish. So look, I'm hardly putting any weight on that roller at all. You could lay it off. Laying off is where you go over it with a dry brush or roller to get your brush marks out. Now, what's this? Is that a lump? No, okay. Here, I don't know if you can see it. Let me just zoom in. I thought that was actually a lump in the paint, but it's not. It's where the surface, the grain of the MDF has started to rise very slightly. And that can happen when you paint MDF. You know, it is, unless, this isn't moisture resistant MDF, by the way. This is just normal MDF. But it's fine to paint. Moisture resistant, you tend to get less problems with the grain raising. But honestly, I'm going to show you that that's not going to turn into a problem. So we're just going to leave this to dry now. Right, so this has had a couple of hours to dry now. Probably 2-3 hours to dry, I would have said. It does dry a lot quicker than that, but we want this to be bone dry for this next bit, because this is probably the key bit in working with MDF that people don't bother with, and this will make all the difference between having a good finish and a mediocre finish. Once it's bone dry, we just need to give mainly the edge grain and any kind of combination grain like this, we just need to give it a very, very light sand. Now, I've got just an old bit of me orbital sander here. This is an old piece. It's 120, but it is used, so it's probably closer to maybe 100 and 150 or even 200, I would say. And all I'm doing is just giving a light rub. Honestly, not much. And it's just to knock back the grain a little bit, because the paint has just raised the surface of the grain very slightly. And all I want to do is knock that back. If you've got any bits that are tricky to get into, what you can do is just wrap a bit of sandpaper around a filling knife like that, and then you can get into all these little grooves. Honestly, 2 swipes is enough. You don't want to take the paint off, you just want to bring the grain down again. So I'm going to just do that all the way around, only really on the edge grain and kind of combination face grains that we're going to have to do this on. If you want, we have got a tiny bit of grain raise on here, you can feel it. And if you want, you can give that a very, very light rub, but not too much. You can also try steel wool instead of sandpaper. If you find the sandpaper's not getting into all the corners, give steel wool a try. You can feel when it's done. A little bit on the edge grain here. Again, you know, the grain's not come up that much. This isn't moisture resistant MDF, this is just normal MDF. It's not bad at all. Shouldn't be taking any longer than, I would say, 5 minutes. If this was a cabinet door, no more than 5 minutes, if that. That's now perfectly smooth. It's hard for you to see, but that's really, really smooth. That'll paint lovely. What I always say is, if you can feel faults in the paintwork, you'll see it. Just going to give it another quick blow with the air gun. Another quick wipe down, just with a damp cloth. Not wet, damp. And we're ready for our top coats. You can watch my other video where I've had a bit of a more detailed look at different water-based gloss paints. I really like this Leyland one, but you know, you like whichever brand you get used to using. This particular paint, I think this is the one where it says don't stir it. Do not stir. Exactly the same as before. Synthetic brush again. Another T-class brush. I've got the 1-inch brush now. This is where, with this particular water-based gloss, you've got to work quick. No mucking about with this one, so I'm going to get straight on the edge first, really quickly get the paint on. So I've got a nice even coat, painted on, layered off with a slightly, once the brush is a little bit dry. This edge as well. It's a little bit awkward because I'm trying to make sure that you can actually see it in the camera. The camera is standing exactly where I want to be stood, so I'm at a weird kind of angle trying to paint this at the minute. I'm just getting any excess paint off my brush here, in case you're wondering why I'm putting paint on the top. So I don't want too much, just a thin coat, that'll do. Same as before, just get any tram lines and runs off the back edge, so we don't have to, otherwise you're just going to have to sand them off. If you want, because I am conscious that I haven't actually undercoated this edge. Obviously what you would have done by now is you would have undercoated both the back and front. I'm just wiping it down with a cloth. I just really want to make sure I haven't got any big blobs of paint on that side. Quick coat on this moulding. As I say, with this water-based gloss, you need to work quick. Otherwise your wet edge disappears very quickly. And then same as before, for the top coat, you can use like a fluffy roller like this, but I always find with these, they always leave bits of fluff in the paint and I get really angry. So I'm back to a foam roller. Again, it's not even a brand new roller. That'll be fine. Get a bit of paint on. Again, ideally, you would be using a roller that's already primed with paint, but this one isn't, so just need to get the roller charged up with paint a bit. If you haven't let your primer dry for long enough, this is the point where you could end up taking some of your primer off with the top coat, so you'll soon know whether or not you've left your primer long enough. I would say a good 2 to 3 hours minimum. If you want, you can always go over it with a hairdryer to accelerate the drying, but you don't want it to dry out too quickly, otherwise it doesn't get a good bond with the surface that needs painted. You see that? You can see it. It's already looking. Plenty of people would leave it at that. It does definitely need another coat though. Just going to put a little bit extra paint on. This is where you can start to be a bit more liberal with the paint if you want. Just a little bit, not too much. Because from here, the grain on the MDF isn't really going to raise any more than it's already done. The primer's done its job, it's sunk into the paint, it's formed a good base to get our finished coats on. As I say, this would have been a bit quicker had I primed the roller in advance, which I hadn't, so all I'm going to do here very, very quickly, do a little bit extra on the outer edges. Again, that just kind of, if there's any globs of paint that have started to form, I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to leave that now. We'll come back to it very shortly. And again, just watch out for bits. You see these sort of bits? Just watch that they don't fall into your paint, because over time it can kind of all build up on this edge. And once that starts falling into your paint, you've got problems and you're going to end up having to sieve your paint, because honestly, you'll be picking out lumps from your paint for the rest of the time. Depending on how much paint you're getting through, obviously. If you're getting through a lot of paint, then it's less of a problem. But over time, all these little bits fall into your paint and you get lumps and you have to pick them out, and it's a nightmare. So just try not to get any of these in the actual paint. Right, so the first coat of the gloss is pretty much dry. Well, it is completely dry now. All I'm going to do is give it a very light go over with a cloth, just to make sure there's no kind of bits of dust falling on it or anything like that. That'll do. Now, some people recommend painting onto the wet surface like that. I haven't had particular success painting onto a damp surface. I prefer to paint onto a dry surface. If you find painting onto a wet surface works, that's fine. Right, and now final coat. Again, I'm just going to start on this edge this time, and everything else I'm now just going to do with the roller. Plenty paint on this coat, because this is our final coat. The MDF is well sealed now, so I don't need to worry as much about putting on too much paint, other than just looking for runs and that sort of thing. But the water-based paint, because it dries so quickly, it doesn't really run very much at all, I've found. Certainly not compared to oil-based. The faster the paint dries, the less runs you're going to get. But also, the faster the paint dries, the harder it is to get a nice finish. So it's a bit of a kind of double-edged sword, and just takes a bit of practice, really. If you're doing this properly, you would have a paint tray for your roller, but I'm just showing you how easy this is. I'm going to lay that off in a minute, don't panic. Quickly do the edges. Hoping I've got enough on my roller. Maybe haven't. Can you see how we've got this little tram line of paint along there? That's what happens when you just press a bit too hard on the roller, and we've squeezed the paint around the corner basically. So I'm just laying that off again, just to remove that mark. That is pretty much as perfect as you're going to get it. Again, you could sand between your coats of gloss if you really, really want to push for the most perfect finish you can possibly get. But you know, let's double check that I've not left any runs in here. But to be honest, we're almost at the point where this paint's drying already. Leave that to dry, and that's going to pretty much do it. I know I've called this a masterclass, but that's just clickbait, really. All I want to do is show you what I've learned over the years of working with MDF and give you a few, hopefully helpful tips. Obviously, you can push this as far as you want in terms of getting the ultimate finish on MDF, but I'm trying to keep it to the best practical finish that you can get without going down the route of either making it prohibitively expensive or using tools and materials that you just generally aren't going to be in your average workshop. But honestly, don't stress about painting MDF. Here's a bookcase I made a couple of weeks ago. This bit on the right is face grain MDF. This bit next to it is edge grain MDF, and there's virtually no difference at all. So there you go. I hope you found this useful. Have a fantastic Saturday if you're watching this on a Saturday. If you're watching it on another day, well, have a fantastic whatever day it currently is. If you're new to the channel, welcome to Gosforth Handyman. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful weekend or week or day or year or month or whatever. I'll see you next time. I'm tired.